Salut tout le monde, c'est ByLambda, on se retrouve aujourd'hui pour une nouvelle vidéo sur le jeu The Stanley Parable. Un jeu que je ne connais absolument pas du tout, sauf que j'ai vu de très bonnes critiques à son sujet. C'est un jeu développé par Galactic Café. C'est un type aventure, c'est sorti le 17 octobre 2013. C'est assez spécial comme jeu apparemment, parce que j'ai pu voir et entendre dans les vidéos et tests. Et jeuxvideo.com lui a donné un 18 sur 20. Donc je me suis dit ça vaut le coup de l'essayer. C'est parti, on va bien voir ce que ça va donner. Je vous préviens, je ne sais pas du tout à quoi je peux m'attendre.
Stanley worked for a company in a big building where he was employee number 427. Employee number 427's job was simple. He sat at his desk in room 427 and he pushed buttons on a keyboard. Orders came to him through a monitor on his desk, telling him what buttons to push, how long to push them, and in what order. This is what employee 427 did every day of every month of every year. And although others might have considered it soul-rending, Stanley relished every moment that the orders came in, as though he had been made exactly for this job. And Stanley was happy. And then one day, something very peculiar happened. Something that would forever change Stanley. Something he would never quite forget. He had been at his desk for nearly an hour when he realized that not one single order had arrived on the monitor for him to follow. No one had showed up to give him instructions, call a meeting, or even say hi. Never in all his years. Perhaps he had simply missed a memo.
Voilà, j'ai recoupé, parce que j'ai cru que c'était qu'en anglais en fait, non. J'ai coupé un petit bout de l'intro que j'ai pas tout à fait tout compris, et là on se trouve que... Il se trouve qu'il est en français, enfin du moins les sous-titres, ce qui me va très bien. On va voir, j'avance, je découvre. Je suis à 30 FPS tout juste, il bouffe pas mal de puissance quand même ce jeu. On peut interagir avec eux, sauf qu'on ne peut rien ouvrir. Ayette, je teste le lundi. On se sent bien seul.
When Stanley came to a set of two open doors, he entered the door on his left.
C'est celle de gauche. En fait, je sais même pas si c'est un jeu qui est censé faire peur ou pas. Donc je risque d'être sur le cul si ça fait peur. D'accord.
Yet there was not a single person here either. Feeling a wave of disbelief, Stanley decided to go up to his boss's office, hoping he might find an answer there.
D'accord, donc la voix off nous raconte plus ou moins l'histoire. En fait, on est Stanley, je crois, et du coup, il nous raconte l'histoire de ce qu'on faisait, de ce qu'on a fait. D'accord. Closed.
Coming to a staircase, Stanley walked upstairs to his boss's office.
Stanley monte les marches jusqu'au bureau de son patron. Ah d'accord. Donc le bureau du patron. Le budget de l'année vient dans le bureau du patron. Je suppose que c'est là.
Stepping into his manager's office, Stanley was once again stunned to discover not an indication of any human life. Shocked, unraveled, Stanley wondered in disbelief who orchestrated this, what dark secret was being held from him. What he could not have known was that the keypad behind the boss's desk guarded the terrible truth that his boss had been keeping from him. And so the boss had assigned it an extra secret PIN number. 2845.
2845.
Stanley couldn't possibly have known this.
2845. 2845. Ici. 2, 8, 4, 5.
Yet incredibly, by simply pushing random buttons on the keypad, Stanley happened to input the correct code by sheer luck. Amazing. He stepped into the newly opened passageway.
D'accord. Oui, ah d'accord. Qu'est-ce que c'est que ce patron psychopathe là? Putain. Je sais pas ce que c'est comme moteur. On dirait le moteur de Valve, le Source Engine. Je suppose qu'il faut que j'appuie là. C'est bizarre, hein. Je cache pas que c'est surprenant. J'ai intérêt à faire gaffe à ce qu'il me dit le gars, parce que si je dois retenir des choses et que...
Descending deeper into the building, Stanley
Comme
realized
le
he
code.
felt a bit peculiar. It was a stirring of emotion in his chest, as though he felt more free to think for himself, to question the nature of his job. Why did he feel this now, when for years it had never occurred to him? This question would not go unanswered for long.
Ils ont dû faire un gros travail sur la narration pour pouvoir en quelque sorte manipuler le joueur pour être dans le jeu.
Stanley walked straight ahead through the large door that read Mind Control Facility.
Centre de contrôle mental central. C'est bizarre.
The lights rose on an enormous room packed with television screens. What horrible secret did this place hold? Stanley thought to himself. Did he have the strength to find out?
Ah d'accord, c'est que des écrans de télé. S'il me filme, je vais pas me sentir observé moi. C'est absolument rien. Imbécile. Ah d'accord. Je vais bien être filmé, c'est ça, c'est ce que je pense.
Now the monitors jumped to
non.
life, their true nature revealed. Each bore the number of an employee in the building, Stanley's co-workers. The lives of so many individuals reduced to images on a screen, and Stanley, one of them, eternally monitored in this place where freedom meant nothing.
C'est un malade. Et il est fou. Putain. Bon bah on continue. Ça me fait un peu penser à un Portal, je sais pas pourquoi.
This mind control facility, it was too horrible to believe. It couldn't be true. Had Stanley really been under someone's control all this time? Was this the only reason he was happy with his boring job? That his emotions had been manipulated to accept it blindly?
C'est le genre de jeu qui me fait réfléchir.
He refused to believe it. He couldn't accept it. His own life in someone else's control.
Never.
Never. It was unthinkable, wasn't it? Was it even possible? Had he truly spent his entire life utterly blind to the world?
On se demande.
But here was the proof. The heart of the operation. Controls labeled with emotions. Happy or sad or content. Walking, eating, working. All of it monitored and commanded from this very place. And as the cold reality of his past began to sink in, Stanley decided that this machinery would never again exert its terrible power over another human life. For he would dismantle the controls once and for all.
Ouais. Si je me trompe pas, mind ça veut dire penser, je crois. On peut appuyer là. Oula. D'accord. Donc là c'est déconnecté. D'accord, on arrive sur un truc CMD là. Fenêtre CMD.
And when at last he found the source of the room's power, He knew it was his duty, his obligation, to put an end to this horrible place and to everything it stood for.
J'imagine qu'il faut appuyer sur off. Oula. Qu'est-ce qui se passe?
Blackness and a rising chill of uncertainty.
Oui, oui.
Was it over? Yes. He had won. He had defeated the machine, unshackled himself from someone else's command. Freedom was mere moments away. And yet, even as the immense door slowly opened, Stanley reflected on how many puzzles still lay unsolved. Where had his co-workers gone? How had he been freed from the machine's grasp? What other mysteries did this strange building hold? But as sunlight streamed into the chamber, he realized none of this mattered to him, for it was not knowledge or even power that he had been seeking, but happiness. Perhaps his goal had not been to understand, but to let go. No longer would anyone tell him where to go, what to do, or how to feel. Whatever life he lives, it will be his.
Wow.
That was all he needed to know. It was perhaps the only thing worth knowing. Stanley stepped through the open door.
C'est impressionnant. C'est typiquement le genre de jeu
Stanley felt the cool breeze upon his skin, the feeling of liberation, the immense possibility of the new path before him. This was exactly the way, right now, that things were meant to happen. And Stanley was happy.
Ouais, c'est spécial. Et la narration est super et les musiques aussi qui vont avec. Je sais pas vous, après c'est une question de goût, mais les musiques sont super. Mais what? Là je comprends rien du tout. Voilà.
But Stanley simply couldn't handle the pressure. What if he had to make a decision? What if a crucial outcome fell under his responsibility? He had never been trained for that. No. This couldn't go any way except badly. The thing to do now, Stanley thought to himself, is to wait. Nothing will hurt me. Nothing will break me. In here I can be happy forever. I will be happy. Stanley waited. Hours passed, then days. Had years gone by? He no longer had the ability to tell. But the one thing he knew for sure, beyond any doubt, was that if he waited long enough, the answers would come. Eventually, someday, they would arrive. Soon, very soon now, this will end. He will be spoken to. He will be told what to do. Now it's just a little bit closer. Now it's even closer. Here it comes.
Oh là là. Ah d'accord. En fait, j'ai l'impression qu'il y a plein de fins différentes. Selon tout ce que je fais, tout ce que je choisis, il y aura plein de fins différentes. Ah, c'est énorme. On peut vraiment s'attendre à plein de surprises.
All of his co-workers were gone. What could it mean? Stanley decided to go to the meeting room. Perhaps he had simply missed a memo.
Ah, c'est énorme. C'est vraiment des jeux originaux comme ça qui vous font sortir un peu de ce que vous avez l'habitude et qui fait que vous les appréciez. Eh ben non, cette fois je vais à droite.
This was not the correct way to the meeting room, and Stanley knew it perfectly well. Perhaps he wanted to stop by the employee lounge first, just to admire it.
Oh, punaise. Non, personne. On peut pas ouvrir. On avance.
Ah, yes, truly a room worth admiring. It had really been worth the detour after all. just to spend a few moments here in this immaculate, beautifully constructed room. Stanley simply stood here, drinking it all in. Yes. But eager to get back to business, Stanley took the first open door on his left. And so he detoured through the maintenance section, walked straight ahead to the opposite door, and got back on track.
Ah d'accord, soit il y a ça, ça va sûrement emmener dans le truc bizarre là. Soit ici. Ah oui, oui. Et là, normalement, ça va ramener au début. Non, c'est fermé. Ah, donc du coup... Oulala, ça c'est...
Yet there was not a single person here either. Feeling a wave of disbelief, Stanley decided to go up to his boss's office, hoping he might find an answer there. Coming to a staircase, Stanley walked upstairs to his boss's office.
C'est vraiment spécial, je vous conseille vraiment de le faire puisque c'est spécial, je sais pas vraiment quoi dire d'autre.
He considered the possibility of facing his boss, admitting he had left his post during work hours. He might be fired for that. And in such a competitive economy, why had he taken that risk? All because he believed everyone had vanished? His boss would think he was crazy. And then something occurred to Stanley. Maybe, he thought to himself, maybe I am crazy. All of my co-workers blinking mysteriously out of existence in a single moment for no reason at all? None of it made any logical sense. And as Stanley pondered this, he began to make other strange observations. For example, why couldn't he see his feet when he looked down? Why did doors close automatically behind him wherever he went? And for that matter, these rooms were starting to look pretty familiar. Were they simply repeating? No, Stanley said to himself, this is all too strange. This can't be real. And at last, he came to the conclusion that had been on the tip of his tongue. He just hadn't found the words for it. I'm dreaming, he yelled. This is all a dream. Oh, what a relief Stanley felt to have finally found an answer, an explanation. His co-workers weren't actually gone. He wasn't going to lose his job. He wasn't crazy after all. And he thought to himself, I suppose I'll wake up soon. I'll have to go back to my boring real-life job pushing buttons. I may as well enjoy this while I'm still lucid. So, he imagined himself flying and began to gently float above the ground. Then he imagined himself soaring through space on a magical starfield, and it too appeared. It was so much fun, and Stanley marveled that he had still not woken up. How was he remaining so lucid? And then perhaps the strangest question of them all entered Stanley's head. One he was amazed he hadn't asked himself sooner. Why is there a voice in my head dictating everything that I'm doing and thinking? Now the voice was describing itself being considered by Stanley, who found it particularly strange. I'm dreaming about a voice describing me, thinking about how it's describing my thoughts, he thought. And while he thought it all very odd and wondered if this voice spoke to all people in their dreams, the truth was that, of course, this was not a dream. How could it be? Was Stanley simply deceiving himself, believing that if he's asleep he doesn't have to take responsibility for himself? Stanley is as awake right now as he's ever been in his life. Now, hearing the voice speak these words was quite a shock to Stanley. After all, he knew for certain, beyond a doubt, that this was in fact a dream. Did the voice not see him float and make the magical stars just a moment ago? How else would the voice explain all that? This voice was a part of himself too. Surely, if he could just... He would prove it. He would prove that he was in control, that this was a dream. So he closed his eyes gently, and he invited himself to wake up. He felt the cool weight of the blanket on his skin, the press of the mattress on his back, the fresh air of a world outside this one. Let me wake up, he thought to himself. I'm through with this dream. I wish it to be over. Let me go back to my job. Let me continue pushing the buttons. Please. It's all I want. I want my apartment, and my wife, and my job. All I want is my life exactly the way it's always been. My life is normal. I am normal. Everything will be fine. I am okay.
Qu'est-ce que c'est embarrassant et...
Stanley began screaming. Please, someone, wake me up. My name is Stanley. I have a boss. I have an office. I am real. Please, just someone tell me I am real. I must be real. I must be. Can anyone hear my voice? Who am I? Who am I? And everything went black.
D'accord.
This is the story of a woman named Mariella. Mariella woke up on a day like any other.
Je suis complètement
She
perdu.
rose, got dressed, gathered her belongings, and walked to her place of work. But on this particular day, her walk was interrupted by the body of a man who had stumbled through town talking and screaming to himself, and then collapsed dead on the sidewalk. And although she would soon turn to go call for an ambulance, for just a few brief moments she considered the strange man.
Qu'est-ce
He
que
was
c'est
obviously
que ça?
crazy. This much she knew. Everyone knows what crazy people look like. And in that moment, she thought to herself how lucky she was to be normal. I am sane. I am in control of my mind. I know what is real and what isn't. It was comforting to think this, and in a certain way,
Oh là là
seeing
là.
this man made her feel better. But then she remembered the meeting she had scheduled for that day. The very important people whose impressions of her would affect her career, and by extension, the rest of her life. She had no time for this, so it was only a moment that she stood there, staring down at the body. And then she turned and ran.
Je sais vraiment pas quoi vous dire sur ce jeu. On va recommencer au début, je pense. Bah écoutez, je vais vous laisser là sur ces deux trois fins différentes. Je vous le conseille vraiment à faire. C'est très spécial. Je sais pas comment vous le décrire, quoi vous dire dessus. Si ce n'est que c'est impressionnant. C'est à faire. C'est une expérience vidéoludique, on va dire, qui est à faire. Écoutez, je vous laisse là. Je vous dis à la prochaine pour une vidéo sur un prochain jeu, peut-être un autre jeu indépendant Steam. J'espère que vous allez nous rejoindre pour voir la suite de nos aventures sur la TeamSFAB. Et à bientôt, c'était ByLambda. Salut tout le monde.